he's talking about basically the whole system in and of itself, right? The whole global economy, the whole sort of democratic enlightenment project is really a failure, he thinks, right? And what he would see as predicted, I mean, he wrote this as Trump was coming up, right? And I think I would see both Trump's populist appeal and I would say what we saw in the campus protest, right, around Israel and stuff like that. And some of the people on this app that will call you a free speech absolutist, right? We use that term. And they mean it derogatively, right? They think it's a bad thing. These are instantiations of an illiberalism. And when I say illiberalism, that sounds prejudicial. I don't mean it to be prejudicial. I think people that think that the liberal democratic project is fundamentally a mistake. It fundamentally destroys traditional values. It's mercenary economically. It makes shitty people that work too hard for not enough money and who elites just shit on, right? Whether they shit on their jobs or they shit on their religious values. It's just, so that's sort of Deneen's argument. I wonder, does Deneen have a point here?
I think the article's prescient.
Right, Marshall? Right? I should have the replays on, but I didn't put them on.
According to what you just read, Scott, is that the question?
Yeah. Is Deneen right? Is liberal democracy, is its shelf life really expired? And I mean, I wonder.
No, I don't believe it has.
Okay, say more.
I don't believe it has because there's so many, the identity, the micro identities of whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or whatever you come from. There are many people who do not want to self-identify because of some kind of visual vanity retribution about, well, you're thinking this way. Say like even Shirley's story earlier talking about, butch cut somebody, whether doesn't matter, right? And being able to have to talk in, like, I can't say too much in description, but I can't show that I have any kind of prejudice. But there are a lot of people, like what I saw in the last election, who did admit what they voted for, who said, you know what, I just can't go for the status quo, but there's not an exact place for me, so I've got to vote according to what I can understand versus who's going to be the one that's going to be doing a better job.
Jason, you're making my point here, though. I think that the Trump vote is the illiberal vote, and I think that is the vote saying liberalism is failing, right? And I think what Harris was doing, running around with Liz Cheney, right, and the Never Trump Republicans, was actually the conservative or the traditionalist move, right? Saying, hey, the liberal democratic project is still worth saving, right? It needs a little tweaking. It needs maybe a more progressive tax structure or something. But fundamentally, the way things are going, the thing we've nourished over the past few centuries, this is a project worth saving. And I think the Trump vote is saying, no, it's not, right? I mean, is at least the populist Trump vote. I'm not talking about the measured people that voted for Trump because, lesser evils. Hey, I have certain.
You're talking about the
also is the man of, if all on earth, therefore does the direction, the Tao that can be
Right. I'm talking about the more emotive people that just think, man, this system is just not working. And they would
the direction towards
Deneen's
both one and
academic
different only.
They wouldn't be able to talk about trends in enlightenment philosophy and political theory in the 19th century and things like that. They wouldn't be able to do that. But they'd intuitively be able to say, yeah, Deneen's right? I'm not making enough money. The elites, one half of the spectrum are just, who's taking jobs away from me. At least on the other ones are telling me I've got to have my transcripts reading to my kid at the library. And all these people feel like they're out of touch with me. And the system's just not working for me. I mean, I think that's a super popularization.
I agree with that.
I agree with you. I think it's popular. And I also think we know
ability to build power and move things, right? I often think some people can't help but feel like the system doesn't function because at the federal part of it, influencing that is difficult and takes many, many years and millions of dollars, right? But if you influence your local city council, or if you influence your county council, right, you can do, I think you've heard me refer to it this way, but I call it deep power.
Yeah, but how is that going to stop Bernie Sanders from taking millions of dollars and then creating propaganda for the vaccine manufacturers? Don't just knock on your door. Go on YouTube and create videos, Marshall. I'm sorry, but I'm just affronted that he has a green bean and I don't have a green bean. I find it to be rude.
Oh, dear God, Jesus. Wait, do we own a conversation? Because I'd like to hear what Marshall says.
Scott, mod me up, please.
Hold on.
Hold on 1 second.
I'm trying to win friends over for you.
I just wanted to say, this guy, Adrian, you are amazing, but why are you asking to get green beaned? Just relax.
Just wait. Adrian, if you would like to stay in the room, I'm happy to have you. The rule is you have to not be a troll and you have to use your brain. Those are the rules. If you don't do that, I will kick you out.
There you go.
So thank you for being the best mom in the room, Beth. I'm being the mom in the 3D world, so I got to go. Talk to you later.
So what I was trying to say was the folks who build deep power, they have a switching in their mind of where power is derived from. A lot of state and federal politics nationalize issues to such an extent that when you talk about a national party, you're talking about trends and you're not talking about the shapes of districts, right? So a representative from, say, Northeast Dallas may be a Republican, but they may be a squishier Republican. And that's not because they don't have any loyalty to the party. It's because their district is purple, right? And so you have a need to kind of tack that way. I think one of the major problems we have faced when it comes to this is that we have misaligned our priorities. Our priorities should start off where we locally are so that you can build the required power when you need to switch the idea that all power derives from the national and switch it to you can build power, you just have to do the work. If you build it locally and if you stay on the project, you will be able to make a difference, and it will be more than a flash in the pan. But the American citizen, the American voter, has to do the basic work of that. So I think added to that article, Scott, would be that in the fact that we have arranged the importance as national over local. And when people look at the national, I will be frank, some of the stuff just doesn't work. Right?
Deneen would agree with you here, right? Like, I mean, Deneen would say, Deneen's prescription is sort of the Benedict option, right? The sort of local community, right? Basically form, the household, the church, the synagogue, the local community and local extensions. That's where you can actually humanize people, right? And and give up on sort of systematic liberalism because it's in decline, it's dying. It will. I mean, this is his words, not me. I mean, I'm just sort of summarizing his argument that it's something that is run by elites, right, on the left and the right. Right? I mean, this is why I think Trump is so interesting, right? Because Trump is took over a party and upended the elite structure in it. Now, whether or not Trump is able to have any systemic impact, right? I mean, I think that probably
I would agree.
less likely, right?
Yeah, I would agree that's up for debate, and he'll probably have influence in the party for 10 years, but maybe that'll be it. Who really knows in that section? It also kind of occurs to me that if the Republicans have the crazies that want to destroy government, and the very far version of the left has a bunch of people who want to destroy government. versus the folks in the middle want to make it work. And there is this seeming inability on the Republican side to govern, right? People want to burn it down. Well, if you burn it down, there's nothing left. You can't do the stuff you want to do. Consequently, it also is not governing, right? Governing means dealing with people's problems.
Yeah, but what did the founders of the country want for this country? Are we doing what the founders wanted us to do?
I mean, you're a smart dude. Make the argument.
Well, I just put in the chat usdebtclock.org. I encourage everyone to go there and look at the actual financial projections and current situation of your government, which is you. You're completely bankrupt. Everyone owes hundreds of thousands and hundreds of millions of dollars and unfunded pension liabilities. It's a never-ending cascade of debt. The whole country is completely broken. So when Thomas Massie puts forth an enactment in one sentence, the Department of Education is thereby terminated. Over. No more money. Done. Thousands of people making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for what? For your kids? No, it's for their jobs, their careers, their salaries. You're being taxed to give people make-believe jobs. This isn't what the United States of America was set up for. This is socialism. This is communism. Let it be gone once and forever. Trump is putting the nail in the coffin of socialist Marxism. It's over, Marshall. Your revolution and your kind is over.
That was pretty good. But I will say this, back to the founders. I mean, I'll just reread the summary of Deneen's argument. Liberalism, as he defines it, encompasses the orthodoxy of political elites. Whether they lean left or right, it was conceived some 500 years ago and was the founding creed of the United States. It prescribes autonomy for individuals to fashion and pursue for themselves their own version of the good life. It advises government to get out of the way in the realm of markets and personal morality. And he thinks it's an unmitigated disaster. So to the degree to which, if we were emulating the founding fathers on their best day, Deneen would say that's the problem, right? That this sort of 18th century, this Enlightenment idea that our founders grabbed onto in the 18th century, Deneen would say that's the problem, right? Like getting back to the founders would only exacerbate the problem, right? Because the founders are, you know, as Stanley Hauerwas would say, we're the only country with the misfortune of being founded on a philosophical mistake.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Scott. I worry that on the wings of each party, both of those wings, the far wings, seem to each be illiberal, both the far left and the far right. And there's a writer, an ancient Grecian writer during Rome named Polybius, and he talks about countries, and he says, all countries collapse. You can never tell when, you can only tell that. And sometimes liberal experiments like that go through upheavals, like we have, go through upheavals, get people reinvigorated. I mean, I think part of the good thing about Trump is there are a lot of folks that voted for him because they felt like the quote elites or the folks with money looked down their nose at them. Oh, y'all are just dumb, stupid hillbillies. And I think that, a perfect example of this is Steve Wheat, right? Simply because he's got a southern accent and he talks slow, people assume he's stupid. He's not a stupid man. And that kind of on high judgment of I know how to live your life better than you do really, really frustrates people. And then I think you get into the histrionics of things. When Biden was president, oh my gosh, everything
no one cares.
He's a communist, his kid's a prostitution ring waiting to heaven, that kind of thing. And now that it's Donald Trump, oh my gosh, it's Hitler and authoritarians are here. One of the pieces about comparing him to Adolf Hitler, that's one of the ones I've already wondered. It's not like Donald Trump seized any new power. He used the prerogatives that the Biden administration had built up and inherited to affect the country. And I think you can handle some of that stuff in a really old school way, which is the bureaucracy doesn't get to do it. The President of the United States gets to do it because they all serve the pleasure. And I think there is this genuine feeling, and I get this feeling when I listen to people on the left-hand side. I'm not a giant fan of Trump. I think he makes lots of mistakes, but this idea that he's Adolf Hitler or that he's the coming of Armageddon is
Barely audible, Jimmy. No one can hear you when you mumble.
Okay, Marshall, I got a question. I know you make very valid points, but is the question: does Donald Trump, in service of not just the party, but does he see himself as a public servant? That's the real question thing, and we talk about
I don't think he
liberalism.
sees himself as
And
I don't think he sees himself as a public servant in the same way that, say, an Eisenhower, a Nixon, or a Bush did.
right,
Yeah,
and so that's
nor does he see himself, I think, as a servant of the system, right? Like there's a sense, I think, that Eisenhower and Nixon see themselves as stewarding a trust, right? That's giving to them. I don't think Trump sees himself that way. And look, it's interesting too, because people are astounded. Not everybody, but there are certain group of people that are astounded the first time Trump got elected, where you had this dynamic of people like, well, I voted for Bernie in the primary and then I voted for Trump. People are like, how could that be? That makes complete sense to me, right? Why someone would go from that extreme to the other, right? Because they're both the illiberal, blow it up vote, right? That's saying, look, those are the Deneen votes, right? This is Deneen's point, right? Those are both the biggest voices on a mainstream platform that were saying the system as it is fundamentally broken. It doesn't need tweaked. It doesn't need, it needs to be upended.
So
Completely.
do you see the framers thinking as the country from where they stood, would they be eventually into a global market or just establishing a sovereignty to where they can operate as a market?
I think those guys thought that they needed to serve the immediate problems in front of them, and then they would worry about getting internet. Like, they would leave worrying about getting into international trade to their successors, right? I think a lot of the founders were really set in America building up strength as a young nation, not getting involved in many countries' issues, in particular Europe's issues, being really kind of skittish of political factions and parties, right? I think if they were looking at us now, their relation of the world would be the United States being a much smaller, much less stable, much less kind of infallible is not the right word, but not established. There we go, that's the right word. That America is not established. Now that we're established, think a little bit differently, at least from what I perceive. And I think that thinking differently means that we need to reference the founders in terms of, not getting into too much trouble. But I also think there are pieces of the system that need absolutely massive reform. Right? Like Social Security, unless we do something about Social Security, it's going bankrupt in 2034. It's going to go from a 1-to-1 payee system to a 2-to-1 payee system. And the Republicans are about 75.
It's already bankrupt, Marshall. They have to borrow 80 cents on the dollar just to pay out current benefits. Yeah, you didn't know that because you don't go to usdebtclock.org and actually look at the financial crisis, which is always now.
Yeah, just let me get back to the point. I think like one of those. Oh, somebody's here. I think that the tendency of the founders to think small and where we are now and what appears to be the ineptness of our government institutions really kind of move people into not trusting, aside from all the other problems we've noticed. They look at the current institutions and don't tend not to trust them. And I mean, when you look
at the younger generations, they don't even think about that stuff. I suppose it was always like that, but it seems to be particularly bad today.
I think, what Deneen thinks is that the founders are inheriting a story, right, from Enlightenment Europe that is basically saying people should be self-determining. They should determine their own view of the good life. There shouldn't be a sort of collective community morality that's received, right? The government should get out of the way of markets and morality, and that government should basically be procedural, right? Government shouldn't be, there's no divine right of kings. There's no sort of, government isn't, as say the New Testament would say, God's instrument to work his ways in the world. Governments should be a minimalist, procedural, constitutional endeavor. That's goal is to, again, have free markets, people that have free morality, self-determining, self-individual. The sovereignty in society is really the individual. Deneen would say, oh, that's just a mistake, right? Like, that's just not the good life, right? That has failed to deliver, that kind of vision for the collective, governance of the people just can't deliver. It's just going to make shitty people that don't know as much, that are thin. And
the system has become a parasite system. It is no longer a mutually sympathetic, transformative synthesis. The system has become vampiric. We all know it to be true.
There you go. I love vampires.
So Scott, I'm sorry, I came a little late, but what is he endorsing? What is the system that
Localism. I mean, he's a localism guy. I mean, he thinks, it's interesting. I don't know what he thinks the end of the liberal project will look like. But I think when I read and listen to Deneen, I think of The Walking Dead. Like, I think of, like, the Walking Dead community in, like, Alexandria. I think he's like, yeah, that's what he should be. He would just want it to be Christian, though, I think. Or Jewish. I mean, whatever. It could be Jewish or something, too, I guess.
Well,
for him.
Do you think, Scott, because I don't you get the sense that young people, I mean, I'm 38, even, like, people in my age bracket seem to be yearning for that. Like, that's, like, that kind of, you have the homeschool movement and the micro farming, whatever you want to, like hobby farms, and everyone like seems to want goats now and drinking goat milk and like trading eggs for milk or whatever. Like, it seems like there is this desire, like this inner yearning for this type of life.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, I think you would see that as positive. I think localism is really I think he thinks the best. There's a book by Rod Dreher, who was an editor, maybe still is, at the American Conservative, and people call him, a so-called crunchy conservative, right? The Birkenstock conservative that has his own chickens and all that sort of stuff. Deneen wrote it. I mean, Dreher wrote this book. Dreher loved this book, by the way. Dreher wrote a book called The Benedict Option, which was very, very popular. I mean, when it came out, everybody was reading it, reacting to it, and that was kind of Dreher's take, right? Like, he looked at like Saint Benedict and the Benedictine monks.
Ourselves to pretend that we are not really God.
How basically when the Roman Empire collapsed, the Benedictines kind of gathered together in
Also,
a essential community, Benedictine rule, and then they were able to sort of give birth to become a monastic rule. And they were able to live on like a tenth or fifth of like what they produced, and they could feed other people, and they could help. It's sort of like who's the guy who wrote the book How the Irish Saved Civilization?
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I
Celtic monks, and this is sort of the Dreher-Deneen argument, right? That basically we're heading into the eclipse of civilization again, and that the best way to consider is local communities, right? That look to this sort of monastic. And I have friends from Protestant monastics. There's been some books written about them. They're mostly sort of progressive evangelicals that have banded together in intentional sort of agrarian communities. And they think that so I mean, there's no grand civilizational program. It's basically just let Rome burn and, have nice religiously grounded farms.
Hi everybody, we're here to talk about singles night again. So first of all, thank you all for coming to singles night and making it a huge success, and we will continue as long as you guys are interested. We have had several inquiries from our customers who are a little older asking
or
if
have
we
more
can do a
common with
single
like the Christian conservative hard right moms.
night.
Like they are both anti-vax. They both like hate public school. It just does. They want an alternative way of life. So it's just kind of interesting how it's all changed. There's a book out now, Marshall, called The Conservative Case for Conservation or something like that. It's like a conservative case for basically being green. It's just, I don't know, with like RFK and everything, it does seem to me like there's a real shift happening in the conservative party. Yes, you've got like the hardline Christian conservative wing, and I think Christianity sort of is the underbelly of like there's some people that like hierarchically kind of lower on their list of politically important items, but like it seems like there's just a real shift going on as far as what's important to the Republicans, which is a good thing in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, but I think even Deneen would say, right, he wouldn't be real concerned about the Republican Party because I think he thinks that it is still too compromised by elites, right? And this is, I mean, you see this, right? And the sort of, I found pretty interesting, the Steve Bannon, Elon Musk kind of tiff. I'll go around. I think Steve Bannon is actually pretty interesting. I've listened to his podcast on it. I think that guy's not a dumb guy, right? And you see this like his like kind of populist nationalist rejection of people like Musk, right? Because he thinks Musk is just sort of a globalist sort of predator, right? That really doesn't think that America first is the priority. I actually wore 2 shirts on a live stream on a podcast the other day. We were live streaming the podcast. I wore 2 shirts in honor of Steve Bannon.
Listen, the Trump administration has to bring equilibrium and balance to the country because the financial projections are that dire. $1 trillion a year in interest only goes up if we keep spending. The thousands of people at the Department of Education making hundreds of thousands a year. I mean, the huge investments in nuclear-powered aircraft, submarines, the big projects. I mean, Trump can't just, invent our way out of this. He can't just say to Elon Musk, hey, go create us some new awesome technology, really revolutionary stuff, and help us expand this economic opportunity so we can pay down the debt. No, it's not going to happen. The system is already baked. These cell phones, they're not going to get any better, these Apple products. We've already achieved an incredible state of technological advancement and industrialization. This growth is not going to happen unless we continue spending this bullshit fiat currency, which is now at $1 trillion a year just in interest payments, which is $100 billion a month we're giving over to lenders. I'm just saying that if we don't do this pragmatically, and use common sense, and we don't, if Trump just spews out more lies and propaganda and doesn't give us the actual transparency that we deserve as American taxpayers and voters, which I believe he is doing, I mean, he'll never fix this ship. The ship has to be made into a glass ship for us to survive the journey. And it's so fucking full of lies. Senator Warren, Senator Sanders, that Rhode Island piece of shit. If you just look at the Kennedy and just look at the RFK Senate confirmation hearings, and you will see how evil and how pernicious of liars these recipients of big pharma dollars are. They make me sick to my stomach when I see them spewing their spit and their lies and their fucking treachery. They are liars.
Fire up.
going to be through hard times. Like, I feel like there's no easy way out of this. Like, we are going to suffer. Like, at some point in some generation, this suffering must occur. Like, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, that's true. The American Empire has to have a reckoning. In particular, for how we see our place in the world, and in particular, noting empires are always parasitic to republics and democracies. Like they may start out as mutually beneficial, but eventually they all get parasitic. Empire erodes republics and democracies. It doesn't build them.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Deneen thinks it'll be disastrous, right? I mean, he thinks it'll be just that the thing will collapse, right? That it's in decline and it's. But I mean, what's interesting though, like about Deneen, is that he doesn't think. Again, like so, some folks have said in the room, you know, like, well, the founders and that's one sort of way to view it, right? That the original project, it was sound, and that its moorings were good, and we've just sort of gone off track, and we need to get back in touch.
Yeah, but decline implies
Deneen would just
renaissance.
reject that, though. Deneen would say the founding fathers are part of the problem, right? It's not that everything that we're struggling with right now is not a bug, but a feature of the system.
How are they a problem? They were ingenious. They were genius.
Well, I'll tell you, Adrian. I'm not saying I agree with it or endorse it, but he would say that the founding fathers are rooted in a mistake, right? That the mistake is the Enlightenment project that says, look, government should get out of the way of the morality business, the market business, that the individual is the most important. It's found on radical individualism. It's not communitarian, right? It's the individual is at the center of the project, right?
Again, but the greatest right a government can afford its citizens is the right to be left alone. They are in our business 99% of the time. Everything is controlled and mandated.
Adrian, that's a liberal Enlightenment value, though. So look, you can't complain that the best people suited to be a politician are not running to be a politician. You can't complain the best people who would be suited to be a general are not going into the track of being a general, because you have the freedom to absolve yourself of all those responsibilities from the source of the Enlightenment, right? So what's the point of having a country when the best people can be free market capitalists and go fucking fuck bitches and make money, if it's now you're like left with the mediocre people doing all this shit in your society?
Well, there's also this piece that Deneen is being honest, Scott says, which is something you've said a lot, which is projects like this decline into darkness at some point. They just do. And I think that's a sad thing for our country, but I think it's a truthful thing, right? Like, democracies and republics all eventually erode. And the mesh with empire, they erode quicker. Meshed with citizens who don't respect unwritten norms, they go down the crapper even quicker. Right?
The American Republic.
Hasn't every government? Couldn't you say that every model has eroded at some point? You're saying that.
Correct. That's corruption and not keeping up with all the things that you used to do. Like not maintaining your military, not maintaining your institutions. So in America, every person and every individual and every generation has the ability to destroy the previous generation's culture by not engaging in it and not passing it down to the next generation. So what happens is that America used to have the can-do spirit that was destroyed by welfare. That was one of the cornerstones of America's settler culture, right? You had building of associations, that was Anglo culture. That was gone now. Until the 90s, we used to have bridge clubs for old people where people could gossip about people's reputation. We had small town America. That's been replaced by suburban America since the 70s and 80s. That culture is gone. Christianity, as a common Protestant understanding of Christianity, that was another cultural unifier in America, that's gone. all the moorings that Scott was just talking about have all been unmoored by liberals and progressives over the last 100 years. We used to teach Christian ethics and morals in schools. We stopped doing that. We used to teach up to 3 years of civics classes in schools. We stopped doing that. We used to teach manners in schools because there were so many irresponsible parents. We stopped doing that.
We used to teach Emily Post manners in school. Are you kidding?
Correct. Until the 60s. And then the liberals said that we should only teach math and English in schools. So we got rid of manners.
We're forcing manners classes back into schools.
Correct. Well, but this is the problem in America, that every new generation can deconstruct or not continue the previous generations. So then you don't get anything passed down. And then the founding fathers also destroyed the European idea of primogeniture, which is passing down your values and your religion. And the father was the head of the religion of the family household, the priest. That role was completely decimated so that any son could run away to a blacksmith and get trained under him instead and sever himself from his family culture. So imagine you had a family who for 300 years were in the military. Now any son can say, I'm going to be an artist or a businessman or a UPS man, and just sever that entire lineage if he's the only son of all that generational knowledge of the military, their skill set that they've earned and gained over the centuries. That would all be severed, and all that knowledge goes into it completely disappears. So all the experts of Europe that continued their lineage down, in America we don't have that because all the experts' sons choose to be something else.
So, as I've said to you before, but other people may not know, prior to the Civil War, most of the officer class of the United States military came out of the former Confederacy. Today,
yes, and Germans, I would say Germans as well. Yeah,
Germans as well. But today, so what I mean is, like today in the 21st century, we still get most of our officer corps out of the South because the South had martial virtue and honor versus the way the North itself developed, right? And that, like, even in the South, that natural virtue and honor is being eroded to where people are looking at their family service and going, well, I don't really think I want to do that, instead of the, ever-present thing, which is families need to be in the military. It just is, kind of is what it is. Serve your country, to do it right, that kind of thing.
Or you get bureaucrats instead, who are just selected from the middle class, who just are put in these positions instead of families who've been preparing themselves for these positions, right? Who have spent even their youth, right? Yeah.
It sounds like the Southern Song Dynasty, right before they got taken over by the Mongols.
Yes, correct. But that was like the fear of the emperor at the time.
Like the Southern Song were like in the somewhere between the 700s and 900s. I can't remember. They were a Chinese dynasty that argued that they did not need to invest their citizens' time in the military anymore. And so all the notable families, the aristocratic families, who had traditionally sent their children to be warriors, stopped doing that. They sent their kids to be scholars.
Well, that's what we need to do. We need to re-embrace the law, which is our Constitution. And that's freedom of speech. It's not just the controversial statements and the ability to say controversial things is freedom of speech in action. It's not just censorship or being recorded and put into government databases. It is the Constitution. We all need a pocket Constitution and a 357 Magnum, and we need to stop spending all this money that we do not have and be honest when it comes to our financial accounting and our books. This is a scam we are all living with, and Trump will probably perpetuate this scam. If he doesn't stop spending immediately, which he is, Doge. The thing is with Doge, and if you look at the actual cuts, if they're saving $1 billion a day and over 4 years, that's $1 trillion in savings. We all know that's not dramatic enough. We all know the Department of Education has to end this month. We all know that the IRS has to end this month. We know that all the military has to be completely shrunken down in size. We don't have the money. Are we all going to keep lying every day in every way to ourselves? It's a fucking scam.
No, we're just going to continue to write checks until the world tells us we can't write them anymore.
Yeah, I think that's what Marshall. Yes, I think that's what's going to happen. Yes, I think that's much more reasonable because I don't think what's going to happen is. I mean, there was this. Oh gosh, I forget what podcasts did this recently. They did a story on in the Tea Party era. I might have been Ezra Klein. No, it was, I forget what it was, but it was this guy who used to report on Tea Party stuff, and he said, this one Tea Party congressman was from Texas somewhere, and he got elected, to cut government spending. And the thing there was this $1 million fund to make people feel better about sheep, right? He's like, this is an example. We don't need $1 million to make sheep farmers, everybody feel good about sheep. He goes, right, and thinking this is just easy to do. He couldn't get it done. There were so many people that were advocating for that $1 million to build these sheep fairs and all this shit that he couldn't get it done. And I think largely that's what's going to. I mean, the only time
that right there, Scott, is the fault of republics. That even the Roman Republic needed to call upon a dictator over 80 times in 300 years because the Senate couldn't stop spending money, stop arguing about stupid things, and collectively all decide to spend money together. So then.
So for the rest of the people, can you explain dictator in the office? Aside from you, I'm not sure many people know.
So the office of the dictatorship was a position that they created just like the president with martial law powers, but it was a little bit more expansive and gave him total power for about 6 months on average. And whenever the Senate became so ossified that no one could agree on anything, or the factions were so strong that no one would move on anything for their own self-interest, they called upon a dictator to fix crises, whether it was economic, whether it was generally military. So you had Celtic incursions to the north, Germanic tribes invading, and he would unite everybody and force them to unite and fight off these enemies. And I mean, the process was that the co-consuls would agree on a person, then they would put the vote up to the Senate, and there would have to be a unanimous vote on this person. So what we consider a dictator in the modern age and the way we use it is a far cry from its original usage. It was actually someone you call in the middle of a crisis, right? So FDR is an example of someone we called upon in a crisis for the Great Depression, where he used his in my opinion, dictatorial powers to create more executive bureaucracy so that he could control the economy without waiting for the Congress or the Supreme Court. So he decided to use that as a way to basically control the war economy. He actually passed the Agricultural Act in 1935.
But when you get back to the now, which is Trump, we voted in the answer. His name is Trump.
Shut up, dude. Stop.
I have a question for Scott.
Can I get a mod badge, please?
I've got a question, Scott. So you say there's $1 million of sheep money that they failed to. People were so dumb that they couldn't get rid of $1 million of sheep money, and that has to do with now in what way? If they're shaving $1 billion a day right now, they're at the pace to get it.
What it means is that people in Congress can't solve even the most minor problems, right? Trying to.
Right, committees are notoriously bad, right? We see this even
I was Elon already.
If you guys have ever been a part of a condo trust or board, you know that they never solve problems. Everything gets pushed out to the next group.
And there's this son of a bitch on it who likes to pick on my parents. Fuck. If I had 5 minutes alone with that motherfucker, I'd punch him in the face.
But they can't be. The board can never be held in account for anything because it's 9 people voting or 5 people voting. How do you ever
see? Violence is inherent in the system.
That's why OPM has to do it. The executive has to do it. That's what they're doing.
Hey, I want to welcome my co-mod from Uncle Steve's room, Cora, to the stage. Cora, welcome. Talking about a a book called Why Liberalism Failed by Patrick Deneen. I know you have lots of thoughts about government. All right, good to see you.
Good to see you.
So, largely just to catch up, I'll reset the room, as we should say. Patrick Deneen is a guy, he's a political scientist at University of Notre Dame. His book, Why Liberalism Failed, I think came out 2016-ish,
2018 was what you said earlier.
The review I'm reading from is 2018, but I think it's older than that. This is a book that Rod Dreher of the American Conservative called Clarifying. Cornel West, my teacher, former professor, called it Courageous. It was on Obama's reading list. So people from the right and the left have hailed this book, and in short, Deneen's argument. I'll read this reviewer here quickly. Liberalism, as he defines it, encompasses the orthodoxy of political elites, whether they lean to the left or the right. It was conceived some 500 years ago and was the founding creed of the United States. It prescribes autonomy for individuals to fashion and pursue for themselves their own version of the good life. It advises government to get out of the way in their own markets, what we would see as a Republican priority today, and personal morality, a Democratic priority. It in his mind has been an unmitigated disaster. And he does kind of predict Trump here. I mean, she's quoting Deneen here. She says, today's widespread yearning for a strong leader, one with the will to take back popular control over liberalism's form of bureaucratized government and globalized economy, comes after decades of liberal dismantling of cultural norms and political habits, essential to self-governance. And then her words, ruthless economic liberalization has left many people materially insecure. Relentless cultural liberalization has left them unmoored. Communal ties are discouraged in order to encourage a mobile force of workers. Freedom becomes something for an increasingly powerful government to grant or withhold. So there you go, resetting the room. For Deneen, liberal democracy is a problem, right? It's not the problems that we're experiencing, income inequality, this anti-democratic populism on the right and left, all this stuff. These are reacting to features of the system, not bugs.
True.
So there you
True.
go. Gio, I knew you would love this. I knew you would love this.
I mean, like, if I could add to that real quick, right? Like, if you think about liberalism and when they give someone the right to vote, they're basically expecting you to analyze all the candidates and every single one of their issues at a local, county, state, and federal level. Every position across the board, from sheriff to comptroller, every position. You have to learn all the different people running, learn all of their issues, and then cross-analyze every one of them until you find someone who fits you the best. That is the intention of giving citizens the right to vote. I doubt heavily most people have the passion, the time, the civic duty, and the obligation that they feel to do these things. And that utopian, like Ubermenchian like view of people is not working out from my perspective. And to assume people are doing this is very utopian. And on the other hand, JFK tried to be libertarian. He said, Americans are gaining weight in the 1960s. 20% of our people, adults, are obese, and our children are becoming obese. Please voluntarily lose weight without having so the government does not have to get involved. Right? He's begging the people, please just lose weight. Figure out local solutions, figure out local government solutions, figure out local associations you can join with your friends and lose weight. America has failed that test so horribly that libertarianism has lost its argument. The free market has lost its argument. A libertarian would say, hey, look, health insurance would get so expensive that people would voluntarily lose weight so that they wouldn't have to pay high insurance costs. No, that doesn't work either, right? So now we're in a situation where we've tried the libertarian method. Everybody was given the freedom to lose weight on their own, and nobody did it. Another example of this is the mental institutions in America. When they were deconstructed by Reagan and the lefties of the time, who united together, their argument was that we should make local institutions, and local mental and health institutions were of the people, so we wouldn't have as much corruption, abuse, neglect that was horribly happening in these institutions. Well, most local areas have not built their own institutions since the 1970s. In some upper class places, you might see some senior living centers and smaller like mental institutions, if you can call them that, but most places have not built their own local or county mental institutions either. So that's another aspect in which the local governments have failed in their the more local governance version of America, let's say. So now what do? We have a society where mentally ill people are wandering around the streets because the family doesn't want to take care of them, the state doesn't want to take care of them, and the local governance don't want to take care of them. It seems like everybody doesn't want to do it.
So this is what I'd like to talk about.
Yeah, Cora, let's let Cora speak. Cora has spoken. Cora, great.
Yeah.
My
People being unaware of scale, right? So certain things work at certain scales. When I talk about this economically, I talk about how communal, co-owned, co-housing, co-whatever works really great at a community scale, but it's really terrible for getting like national infrastructure built. Like consensus and direct democracy doesn't work for big projects, but it works really great when you're trying to organize a bunch of people into agreeing, right, to maybe give up some of their individual rights in order to have a group voting sort of like pull, group buying capacity, group negotiation, economies of scale for building out communities, right? So, on an economic standpoint, but this also goes with like, when you're talking about freedoms, that's where freedom of association comes in. And I think right now we've kind of we've lost the mid-scale on just about everything in the United States. We've lost where it's like all either individual or big government. And we're even talking like big government at the local level. People all function in this capacity as if the local government is just an extension of some sort of national party platform or organization, right? And so this is where we need to start looking at how do we scale things correctly and apply the appropriate solution at the appropriate scale. So, federalize things work great for interstate commerce, national infrastructure, and then also at regulation, right? So you're ensuring that one mid to small scale group isn't just like belching out pollution affecting the ones next door, that sort of thing. That you're ensuring that one community isn't externalizing their costs onto another community. That's where regulation comes in. But otherwise, things that are best decided at like the local scale, at the community scale, are things like, what are our shared moral values, right? How are we going to structure our how we give care to children, et cetera, et cetera. That stuff doesn't need to be negotiated, legislated at the national scale, and I think that's where people get really weary of sort of libertarian bents, because they think if we go fully libertarian at a national scale, it's going to be this ANCAP sort of nightmare dystopia, right? And if we go fully authoritarian state communism at the national scale, it's going to be an anarchist, not even anarcho-socialist, it's going to be authoritarian socialist nightmare. So, again, scaling, that's the big issue.
I tried to get in the queue. Can I?
Go ahead.
It's actually more a point of order, Scott. 2 points of order, but.
In this room, you have to
reading
pull
from
points
earlier.
of order POOs.
Oh, what?
There's a parliamentary shorthand for that, and it's POOs. Point of order.
Who's?
But now that I had to explain the joke, it's no longer funny.
I'm calling a poo here, and Scott, what was the passage you were reading from a bit earlier?
That's from the link above. It's a review of Patrick Deneen's book, Why Liberalism Failed, which is Deneen is a major political theorist, teaches at Notre Dame, and he's someone that's been across the spectrum hailed as a pretty serious thing.
Scott, he probably can't even explain how inflation happens. You really think he's that gifted and intelligent?
And I'll just say, I'm not going to complain anymore. I complained to Marshall, but Scott, after our conversation the other day, I know this is being broadcast on YouTube and Instagram and everywhere, Twitter, I'm sure. But I was very surprised.
Just YouTube.
To hear, excuse me, one second. It's very.
Be sure to share the video, like it if you can, subscribe right now.
I'm trying to actually compliment this loser.
2015 or something. What are you saying? It's stupid.
Absolutely not. You know, in Tel Aviv, there are like 2 Bitcoin stores, and they're just like fronts for gangs, like activity.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, they're always empty. They're always empty, and it's just like this huge Bitcoin store.
So it's like a Bitcoin store?
What do you need a physical Bitcoin store for? Yeah.
Maybe they have like an ATM and you can buy it there.
No, it's like gang activity.
I don't know. I can't confirm. I don't know what you're talking about. So.
You don't need to know. I know. So.
Bitcoin is awesome, and anybody who doesn't like it probably just doesn't own any.
I didn't like say the Bitcoin thing like as a way to get back into the conversation about Bitcoin.
I know.
Are you guys talking about Bitcoin?
Who's Adrian? Oh, is this what's his name?
I buy and sell Bitcoin. Are you guys looking to sell any Bitcoin?
Oh my god, the way I buy the way you said that, I thought it was Diogenes.
Have you heard about my 3-point plan?
No.
Your 3-point what?
My 3-point plan.
The deport with prejudice, whatever.
This, at least the way you're speaking right now, is so much less miserable to listen to than the accent from yesterday.
Oh my god, that was too much. Yeah, I agree. I was also getting like, who?
I left. I literally left because of you.
That's what please don't give him that. Like, he's gonna do it again and again.
No, he doesn't. He likes me. He doesn't want me to leave his room.
No, he will do that. He doesn't give a shit, Al.
Yeah, he does.
No, he doesn't. He will do it again just to bully you.
You're obsessed with us. You always follow us into everyone.
He's obsessed with everyone.
He's obsessed
Apparently,
with us.
you don't know how an algorithm works.
He doesn't give a shit. That's the thing.
I mean,
right now, priorities of
within their purview without anything. I mean,
I agree.
No.
Did you hear that the U.S. military conducts airstrikes against Islamic State operatives in Somalia?
Oh, that's not my time.
No, I know. I'm just kidding around.
Oh.
Okay.
By the way,
What?
I can't remember who, but they.
Hi, Jason. How you doing?
Pretty good. I guess we're going to do a two-parter because there's two things I wanted to talk about, but I just wanted to start with the question of the room, and then we'll probably start talking about Trump's tariffs.
Yeah, I figured that. Like, Trump's tariffs is going to be an interesting subject. I talked to my little brother about him getting elected first. That was one of his chief worries, that the president would go tariff happy. And he served in the Senate on the Commerce Committee, which deals with trade specifically, right? So that was, like I said, that was one of his big concerns.
They're not going to win the Super Bowl. So when you talk about 76 in Portland,
yeah.
I do have a question for you. What do you make of the way he's using the power? I've heard a lot of people describe him as like he's using the power like an authoritarian. Sorry for the train, but he's using the power like an authoritarian. And I'm curious your opinion, whether you see it as he's using the power in a dictatorial fashion, or if, hey, the president already had that prerogative, like what are people worried about, kind of thing.
I mean, I don't know what doing anything in a dictatorial fashion is supposed to mean. Like,
it's something somebody told me.
Dictator is roughly what I get, but I mean, you can say that about anybody. I don't know what that means.
So I use that description because that's how it was described to me. They thought Trump was being.
You said that I'm saying.
Gotcha.
It doesn't seem to be much.
Sorry about that. Get the West Coast involved, and we get some bioregional models. We've got all sorts of looking at like the structure of how best to organize organized. The best city planning comes off the West Coast at this point, I would say.
Oh, you're ridiculous. Do you know how much money they've wasted spending money on the homeless in Los Angeles to no effect?
All of these are things that we can do well and that other parts of the United States are resistant to because of their history and tradition, which I don't begrudge them at all, right?
You don't begrudge them at all. It's very generous of you.
RS30.
Yeah. With a
Hold on, I'm not coming.
Okay, that's a take.